And now, from approximately coast to coast, Bob Elliott and Ray Goulding take pleasure in presenting the Bob and Ray Public Radio Program.
Webley Webster here used to...
I used to play the organ when you were on that radio station there in New York.
Biggest hit was Jealousy, I remember.
Yes, sir. Big studio organ. I used to play
and the
all
longest
the time.
introduction of any song.
Not many radio stations have a big pipe organ anymore. They just have these little squirt things.
Well,
that
part of
was playing.
Part of it's the financial thing, and these take up less room. You know, we're doing that. We want to welcome you to this Bob and Ray Public Radio Show, brought to you by our generous subscribers. Einbinder, the greatest name in flypaper. This year, more than ever before, make flypaper an important part of your life.
And, of course, by Monongahela, the metal foundry that casts ingots with the housewife in mind.
We like to kind of think of ourselves as like a city desk at a newspaper, a place where different correspondents and reporters can submit their stories, and we go through them, pick out the best, and broadcast them.
And there's one type of reporter's assignment that's been an old standby on radio, television, and newspapers. Editors always seem to want the views of the man on the street whenever there's a controversial news development. Now, it's hard to say why we value the wisdom of the common man so highly, but no matter, they do. So here's ace Bob and Ray reporter Wally Ballou.
Lee Ballou seeking the views of some passers-by here on the street, views on the latest speech from the White House. Sir, would you step over here and talk to me, please?
You want to talk to me?
Yes, I would like to. Did you hear the president's speech about the economy?
Well, more or less. I was trimming the cat's toenails, but the TV was on in the other room. I could hear somebody talking, and the voice sounded familiar.
It was the president, huh?
Yeah, I recognize his voice from the other room.
Well, now, we're getting the reaction of people like yourself to his address. For instance, the point about declining productivity being a major cause of inflation.
Well, sure. Now, you take the laundromat on the corner. Now, their dryers used to give me 10 minutes for a dime. Now it's up to 15 cents, but they only run for 8 minutes.
Right. Could you step over here where we don't get quite so much traffic noise? When the president spoke of productivity...
Well, I understood him perfectly, and I agree. Now, you take the elastic in my shorts. It never gets dry in 8 minutes, so I'm stuck for an extra 15 cents, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Now, the president also talked about cutting back foreign imports.
Well, look, let me finish my thought on this productivity thing. See, my sister-in-law owns one of those donut shops where they got a machine in the window that makes the donuts.
Well, I'm sure your sister-in-law has her problems with the economy, too, but what
She's got no problems. I've got problems. I work there. I sprinkle the chocolate sprinkles on the donuts as they go by, see?
Well, I know. We were talking about things like Japanese automobiles.
Well, look, what I'm telling you is that my sister-in-law speeded up the machine last week, and I still get paid the same, you know? Now, is this justice?
No, I suppose not, but does that mean you agree or disagree with the president about declining productivity causing inflation?
Well, let me put it this way. In our parents' time, should a man like me, who's at the peak of his earning power, have to go around with damp elastic in his shorts?
Did you say you heard the speech or not?
Well, part of it from the other room. My TV's in the kitchen. But like I say, I was trimming the cat's toenails, and you don't want toenails flying around the kitchen.
No,
you
you don't. And I appreciate getting your thoughtful insight on the president's address, and this is Wally Ballou sending it back to our main studio.
Thank you, Wally. I would like to welcome a new subscriber to our program, too, making their first appearance on radio.
Hi, this is Rudolph.
And Irma.
Of the Rudolph and Irma Dance Studios. And if you have a dollar bill...
Any dollar bill...
that's green...
it entitles you to one free dance lesson at
Rudolph and Irma's Dance Studios, located at 5913 Harper Street in Arverne, Long Island.
And if you don't have a dollar bill...
any Lincoln Head penny will do.
And if you don't happen to be one of the lucky holders of a Lincoln Head penny...
you can show us an empty change purse.
Or an empty wallet.
And still get a free dance lesson, provided you give us a verbal statement of intent that you plan to buy a wallet.
Or a change purse. And that address again is...
Rudolph and Irma's Dance Studios, 5913 Harper Street,
Arverne, Long Island.
Where you learn the breakaway fade, popularized by Henry Armstead, Wizard of the Waxed Floors.
Or perhaps you'll be taken by the concamonga, a combination of the conga
And the manga, as taught by Perry Sanchez, the hero of the hardboards, at
Rudolph and
Irma's Dance Studios in Arverne, Long Island.
And for you older folk who prefer a less lively dance step, chat with us about learning the creek.
A mild dance step made well known by that septuagenarian of slide, Amos Neezer.
And of course, there are the more popular steps you can learn.
Like the jockey trot,
Or the hot coal hop.
and of course, the very much in vogue cocktail dip.
It's taught by Felicia Floodgate, the siren of the surfaces,
All this at
Rudolph
and
and
Irma's
Irma's
Dance
Dance
Studios in Arverne, Long Island.
where you'll find dancing a pleasure
On our deep pile rugs.
in tastefully furnished offices,
And don't forget to ask about our colored rotating chandelier.
which throws a myriad of multicolored lights on each dancing student.
And for those of you who care for music while you're dancing, arrangements can be made for melodies to be played.
So be sure to ask about the chalk footprint method of dancing.
With footprints skillfully drawn by Lionel Warp, the Titan of Taps.
All this at
Rudolph and Irma's Dance Studios, 5913 Harper Street.
Auburn, Long Island.
And will the soft shoe dancer who left his soft shoes at the studio please pick them up this week?
Before they melt completely. Oh, I'm sorry, Rudolph.
No, that's all right.
Did you want to say that together with me?
Well, that's all right.
Togetherness is so important, though.
Yeah, especially in the dance business.
That's right. Well, now we're in for another nostalgic interlude as we welcome Ralph Flinger to our microphone. Ralph is better known to most of you as Mr. I Know Where They Are. Now, he spent a lifetime tracking down old-time celebrities who are no longer in the spotlight. And Ralph, it's amazing how many of our listeners write in asking your help as they try to locate their favorites of days gone by.
Well, I'm delighted to do whatever I can to help, Ray. You know, I send out more than 100 birthday cards on the average day to washed-up celebrities who've grown a year older. And I know it makes them feel better when I can include a little note that tells them they're still remembered by your listeners.
Well, they certainly are remembered, I'm sure, Ralph. This letter I have here is from a woman in Oregon, is typical of those that come in addressed to Mr. I Know Where They Are. She says that her girlhood hero was a rich society playboy named Wainbridge Van Cortlandt. But she hasn't read anything about him now in the paper for years, and she wonders whatever became of him.
Oh, goodness sakes alive. Wainbridge Van Cortlandt. His grandfather made millions selling defective railroad ties back in the 19th century when the Iron Horse was first spanning the country.
And tying it together into one great nation, you mean?
Yes, except on the lines where old man Van Cortlandt had provided the railroad ties. The wood in most of them was infested with termites, so that caused the locomotives to tip over before they had a chance to tie this country together into one great nation.
I see. But of course, Wainbridge Van Cortlandt wasn't responsible for any of that.
No. That swindle of his grandfather's happened long before his time. About the worst thing Wainbridge ever did was ride down Wall Street during the Depression on one of his polo ponies.
Uh-oh.
Several former stockbrokers were kicked as they stood on the sidewalk trying to sell apples.
Yeah.
But later, Wainbridge gave them each $1 to show that it was nothing personal.
Well, it sounds as if the man was a decent sort of a fellow that any young girl might have worshipped from afar. But where is he now?
Well, Wainbridge lost everything during the war, Ray. He'd invested the family fortune in buying a South Pacific island, but the Japanese managed to sink it some way. I think they just let the air out underneath it and it fell. Anyway, Wainbridge now lives in a small furnished room across the street from the bus station in St. Louis. He supports himself by raising goldfish and selling them to his neighbors.
Well, that's quite a come down for a millionaire playboy, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But at least you've answered the lady's question. Our next letter, addressed to Mr. I Know Where They Are, is from a man in Utah. He remembers a famous rodeo rider of years ago named Tumbleweed Gargan. And he wonders if you happen to know where Tumbleweed is.
Well, indeed, I do know where Tumbleweed Gargan is. I think he was a hero of every young fellow who grew up in the West, Ray. He used to rope wild bison before that rodeo event was outlawed by most state legislatures.
Well, that's very interesting. Where's Tumbleweed now?
Well, I don't think they ever officially outlawed bison roping in Montana, but since the event had been dropped from rodeos in other states, it gradually died out there, too.
I see. Well, what about Tumbleweed Gargan?
A lot of people claim that bison roping constituted cruelty to animals. I don't know why they still have calf roping in rodeos, and calves are similar to bison, except that they're not as woolly.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Where is Tumbleweed Gargan now?
He's in Fort Worth, Texas.
Well, is that all?
Yes, as far as I know.
Well, I guess that takes care of that. I think we have time, looking at the clock here, for one more quick question addressed to Mr. I Know Where They Are. It's from a woman in Virginia, and she's wondering about a former child movie star named Fat Baby Moxford. She thinks he was a member of the group that called themselves the Little Cut-Ups.
Oh, yes. Not people remember that. Not many people do, but Fat Baby Moxford was one of the original Little Cut-Ups. He was later replaced, I believe, by Pinky Luling. Studio had to drop Fat Baby around 1927 because he stopped being a baby, even though he did manage to remain fat.
Well, that should give the listener who wrote in a lot of good background information. But what she really wanted to know is what became of Fat Baby Moxford.
Well, he's now the president of a large corporation in Palo Alto, California that deals in computer software, Ray. And I think that's really quite a tribute to his ability. Imagine it's quite difficult for a middle-aged man to get to the top in the business world when his name is Fat Baby Moxford.
Yes. I'm sure he'd have to put forth extra effort to prove that he had what it took, particularly in computer software. So just let me thank you for answering the lady's question, and also those of our other listeners.
Oh, I was delighted to do it, Ray. Chatting about all these old people helps keep me young. Goodbye.
Bye. Say, friends, have you checked your household flypaper lately to make sure it's retaining its full stick-'em quality? Even the finest brands tend to dry out after hanging indoors for a few years.
Hi, this is Bob and Ray reminding you that dry flypaper is a useless weapon in your battle against swarming insects. So replace your old dead flypaper today with Einbinders, the brand you've gradually grown to trust over the course of 3 generations. Now we should have a little sports talk. We haven't done that for quite a while.
A little sports music.
Hi, sports fans. This is Biff Burns in the sports room, and today we're welcoming a great hero of the game of baseball, a fellow who's had some 29 years in the sport. He's finally retiring, and I speak, of course, of Stuffy Hodgson. Stuffy, welcome to the sports room. How do you feel?
Well, I feel pretty sad, naturally, Biff, realizing that this is the last day. Pretty sad.
Well, that's a pretty normal way to feel, but still in all, looking back over this long career of yours, you got to admit the game has been pretty good to you.
Well, not as good to me as some of these young punks that are coming along.
Well, I detect a note of Riker there. What do you mean exactly?
Well, when I first come up to the big leagues, playing the game was everything. Sure, you got paid for it, but now all these young guys think about it. Big salaries, and big homes, and big cars, and vintage wine, and beautiful women, and making TV commercials, and sleeping late in the morning.
Looks like guys like you went wrong somewhere along the line.
I know, and these young guys, they all have these little radios going in the locker room all the time, playing a bunch of noise. Now, I don't understand that kind of music. Whatever happened to the songs that Pat Boone and Kate Smith sang? I mean, those guys sang real songs.
I guess so. I don't know much about music.
And here they're always kidding around. Now, they loosen the spikes on my shoes, you know? So I run wobbly.
Oh, that's right.
And they put cheese up here in the band of my cap.
Wow.
It took me till August to track that smell down.
That's really
I heard the
terrible.
other day they dumped a pail of water on me and the sports writer back there. Well, you know, I like a joke like the next guy, but you go too far.
Yeah, I think I read something about that. You know, looking back, it's good to see that after all of these years and the ups and downs, you've managed to retain your sense of humor. I think
You got it.
I know that you're one of the most important speakers on the sports banquet circuit. I guess you could go out and appear at those things 5-6 nights a week if you wanted to. Give us one of the stories that you tell at those affairs that
Sure.
go over so well.
Well, when I first came up to the big leagues, I was just a kid, of course. And my first time at bat, I'll never forget. They had the big guy out in the mound, the big left-hander. Do you remember him?
I remember him well.
Well, he was throwing real smoke that day. I couldn't see the ball. And the umpire behind the plate was a great big guy. Do you remember him?
No, I don't remember.
Well, anyway, the third strike goes by me, and the umpire says, "You're out." So I was nervous, and it was the first time up. I took my bat, and I threw it straight up in the air. And the umpire took off his mask, and he came over to me. He says, "Young man," I was a young man then. He says, "Young man, if that bat comes down, you're out of the game." That's the anecdote.
Yeah. No wonder you're so much in demand at those. You know, I know that you also developed a reputation for not looking after what you ate or drank or how much. Still in all, you seem to be in pretty good physical condition. How do you account for that stuff?
Well, I wouldn't buy any stock in what you just said.
You wouldn't?
No, the worst thing to happen in this game is this artificial turf. You know, it's like playing the game on a billiard table. You're back there to make a play, the ball takes these crazy hops, jumps up and hits you here in the clavicle. No, you got to dig in and play it. If you're going to win this game, you got to dig in, you got to make that play. And that goes for both teams, irreversible.
Stuffy, do you think now they're going to retire your number?
No, they got some young punk wearing it out there now.
Well, I see the mayor and Whitey Ford and George Burns coming
Where?
into the
Oh, yeah.
dugout for the retirement ceremony, so I'll just say thanks a lot and wish you a lot of luck. And this is Biff Burns in the sports room saying until next time, this is Biff Burns saying so long. Today, we announce Bob and Ray final clearance, a closeout, absolute clearance sale.
We are being forced, to vacate our premises. Our lease has been foreclosed.
Our landlord says we must go, and his ultimatum is your good luck.
Now, we have to get rid of every last piece of our tremendous stock at ridiculous sacrifice.
Now, because we must go, you can buy men's two-pants suits for $16.50. Men's three-pants suits for $17.50. And men's four-pants suits for $18.59.
And men's all pantsuits for $19.50. Now, you can get men's complete winter overcoats at $22.50 and men's winter overcoats without sleeves for $17.50.
Our lease is up, and you get the benefit. Men's winter underwear with long legs and long sleeves for $1.75. An extra pair of legs for only 38 cents.
Yes, the landlord says vacate, and that's it. What? Excuse me.
Us?
Hello? Yes. What? We can? Darn it.
What's the matter?
The landlord says we can stay another year.
And welcome now to The Big Scoop, the program that pays tribute to the outstanding accomplishments of the nation's working newspapermen. And here at our news desk, prepared to tell you about this week's Big Scoop Award, is our Big Scoop editor, Big Fred Scoop.
Thank you, Norman, and welcome to the Big Scoop. Now, this week's handsome award, suitable for framing, together with a certified check for $15, goes to Millard L. Peavy, the crime reporter for the Kenosha, Wisconsin Star-Tribune and Morning Throwaway. It was only a little more than a year ago, on March 14th, 1981, that Millard Peavy's career took a sudden turn when he was called into the office of his managing editor.
Peavy, I've been wanting to speak to you personally because I plan to clean out some dead wood around this office. Naturally, you'll be the first to get the old heave-ho. Unless you can explain what you've been doing the past few weeks. You haven't written a story for this paper since you covered the Eastern Star rummage sale on Lincoln's birthday. What have you been goofing off over since then?
Well, actually, Chief, I've been working night and day on the story that could become my big scoop. You remember Big Daddy Gumbert? The guy who was sentenced to life in 1971 for hijacking a truckload of peach cobbler and killing the driver? Well, I'm convinced he didn't do it, Chief. And I'm out to prove that an innocent man is rotting in prison.
Well, I can't believe you're serious, Peavy. I remember the Gumbert case very well. The police found bits of stewed peaches on his shoes. Besides that, he dropped his driver's license and 5 credit cards in the cab of the hijacked truck when he abandoned it. His trial only lasted a half hour before he was found guilty.
Well, that was only because he signed a full confession, Chief. But I know that he had to be shielding the real criminal. Too many things don't add up. And I intend to get to the bottom of this.
All right, Peavy. Follow up your hunch if you want to, but if you're wrong and disgrace this newspaper, you're finished here at the Kenosha, Wisconsin Star-Tribune and Morning Throwaway.
Well, I understand, Chief. And as a working journalist, I'm honor bound to see that the guilty are punished and the innocent are set free. I'll put my career and my future on the line for that if I must.
And so Millard Peavy began the difficult job of searching for new evidence about a crime that had occurred 10 years before. First, he sought out the medical man who headed the local police crime lab.
Say, Doc, I'm convinced that someone ordered you to say that peach cobbler was found on the suspect's shoes, not to mention his fingerprints being found on the murder gun. Would you care to comment on why you committed perjury at the trial?
You miserable wretch. Next, Peavy chatted with the retired police chief, who had been in charge of the force at the time of the Gumbert case.
Hey, Chief, it strikes me as quite a coincidence that you suddenly found you had enough money to retire only 4 years after Big Daddy Gumbert was put away for a murder he didn't commit. How about filling in the missing pieces for me?
Why, you rotten little punk. Finally, Peavy went to the man who had been the prosecuting attorney in the Gumbert case and had since gone on to become governor of the state.
Say, Governor, I'm sure that you know your political career will be finished once I break the story on your crooked double-crossing background. Why not tell me all about it? Maybe I can go easy on you.
You reprehensible pipsqueak. Armed with the facts, Millard Peavy returned to face his editor.
Sorry it took a few months longer than I expected, Chief, but you run into a lot of dead ends digging into a story like this. After all these years, the people involved were still determined to protect each other. And it takes a long time to chip away the alibi.
I understand, Peavy, but it was well worth the time if this paper can break the story that Big Daddy Gumbert is in prison for a crime he didn't commit.
Well, I'm afraid you'd better not run a story like that, Chief. This one I just wrote is safer. It's got all the documented facts in it to prove that Gumbert was guilty as sin. Now, I don't know why I ever thought he might be innocent, but at least I can save you the trouble of firing me. Here's my concisely written letter of resignation. I've done my duty as a journalist, and now I'm finished.
And so it was that Millard Peavy capped his long journalistic career with a fine job of investigative reporting that proved how our criminal courts had convicted a guilty man. Peavy now operates a shoeshine stand in the Kenosha bus depot. But at heart, he's still a newspaperman, and one whose story we've been privileged to tell here on The Big Scoop.
Welcome once again to Gary Summit and its continuing story of intrigue among the socially prominent. There in stately splendor, far removed from the squalid village below, they fight their petty battles over power and money. Now, as this week's action begins, young Rodney Murchfield is counting paper clips in his palatial office at the Murchfield Lead Mining Company. And suddenly, his evil brother Caldwell enters. Rodney speaks.
527, 528, 529.
I don't know whether you've heard about it yet, Rodney, but Mother just made me vice president of the family business. Where shall I put my golf clubs?
I really don't care. And I might add, the very idea of your being an officer of this firm fills me with disgust. 548, 549.
Well, I'm not too crazy about having you here either, but since you're president of the outfit, I'll try to make the best of it.
You're missing the point, Caldwell. My whole life has been dedicated to Birchfield lead mining. Lead is in my blood. Now you've suddenly appeared as my long-lost brother, and I don't see that 30 years of being long-lost qualifies you for an executive position.
Excuse me, would either of you care for some coffee?
Not now, Pamela. I'm in conference and can't be disturbed.
Yes, sir.
586, 587, 580.
Gee, I hope she comes back. I sure would have liked some coffee. Besides, I could tell she was giving me the big eye.
Caldwell, that young lady's in love with me, and I'm planning to leave my wife to marry her. It's scheduled for next Thursday, I believe. I have it here in my appointment pad somewhere.
Well, look, while you're looking for that, I'll outline my plans for changing our company's product line now that I'm a big cheese here.
Don't talk nonsense. We can't change the product line. This is a lead mining company. Our only product is lead.
Excuse me. If you're too busy for coffee, does that mean you want me to hold your calls, too?
Yes, by all means, Pamela. Hold my calls.
Yes, sir. You haven't had any so far today, but if one comes in, I'll hold it.
Frankly, Caldwell, I can't imagine why you'd suggest changing the firm's product line when this is only your first day on the job.
Well, a business only sells lead ingots. Just doesn't have much pizzazz. Besides, I saw a couple of our salesmen in the parking lot. Poor guys couldn't even lift their sample cases.
Well, your compassion for the hired help is very touching, Caldwell, but if the men don't like it here, they can look for work in another state where we Birchfields don't control the economy.
Excuse me, but since you're in conference, I thought this might be a good time for me to go to lunch.
Yes, go to lunch, Pamela, by all means.
Thank you. I thought it might be a good idea to do that.
It's hard to branch out from lead, Caldwell.
Gee, I was hoping maybe she'd go to lunch with me, but you sure put the kibosh on that.
Pamela's my fiancée, Caldwell. I already told you that.
Well, I plan to muscle in on you, but I guess I can wait.
Fine. Then let me complete my thought. We've made previous attempts to broaden the Birchfield product line with toy soldiers, fishing sinkers, all that sort of thing. In fact, we once adopted a new company motto: if it's heavy as lead, Birchfield makes it.
Well, that's been your whole trouble, you see. You can't see beyond lead. I've taken steps to get us into the big money. Thanks to my efforts, there'll soon be a gambling casino operating on this very spot.
What in heaven's name are you talking about?
Birchfield Lead has taken in a new partner, Rodney. I've settled an old personal debt by merging us with Big Auto from Detroit.
I hope you're only joking, Caldwell. Before I'd allow a thing like that to happen, I'd strangle you with my bare hands. 617, 618, 600...
Well, can organized criminals fit in comfortably with the socially prominent Birchfields? And what about Pamela's mysterious failure to return from lunch? Perhaps we'll learn more next week when we hear Rodney say,
"Now that I've signed the merger agreement, is it all right for me to take my feet out of the wet cement, Otto?"
That's next week, when we resume our story of endless intrigue on Gary Summit.
Say, here's good news for you homemakers. You're well aware, I'm sure, that extra shiny steel ingots have been in short supply this season at your Monongahela Metal Foundry showroom. But now we're happy to say that supply has nearly caught up with the tremendous demand.
You may still encounter a limit of 3 ingots to the customer in some scattered areas. But in most places, your Monongahela agent will be happy to sell you as many as you need to replace those old worn-out ingots you've been forced to use during the shortage. So stock up today while there's a good selection.
Well, with that, hardly seems possible. I think time is just about up for this one, huh?
Yeah, it looks like it has. We got to go. We should remind you all, though, that the Bob and Ray Public Radio Show was developed and produced for the Radio Foundation by Larry Josephson, who has known the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And he can't decide which he likes best.
The associate producer is Marjorie Van Halderen. who's had it up to here with Frank Sinatra records.
And Mr. Music is Stan Free. Audio engineer Mike Moran.
Funding in part from the National Endowment for the Arts and the New York State Council on the Arts.
Now, this is Ray Goulding reminding you to write if you get work.
Bob Elliott wanting you to hang by your thumbs.
This program was independently produced by the Radio Foundation.
And now, from approximately coast to coast, it's the Bob and Ray Public Radio Show. Okay, and today we've had our scouts searching the railroad and bus stations around New York for victims of misfortune. And several of them here have been selected to receive assistance from our generous Bob and Ray organization. Bob, I see you have one of those miserable creatures there at the microphone with you right now.
Yeah, I do, Ray. This pathetic specimen is E.L. Werberly of Niles, Michigan, if I read that correctly.
Yes, Niles, Michigan.
And you state that you came to New York for treatment of a rare illness, is that right?
Yes, that's right. See, my hair began falling out about 2 months ago, and the diagnosis has now been confirmed that I've got Dutch elm disease.
Well, I'm told that's quite unusual among humans and would be hard to treat in a community as small as Niles, Michigan.
Well, we've got a tree surgeon there, but all he could suggest was sawing off a few of my limbs to see if the condition would clear up. Of course, I'd prefer not to have that done.
Well, don't you think it might be better than going around with that forestry department sign nailed to your shirt?
Well, I'm beginning to think it might. I'm not contagious to humans. But here in New York, the rare disease specialists all seem to have their offices close to Central Park.
Yes, they do.
And the police won't let me go into the neighborhood because I might kill the trees.
Well, you've certainly become one of society's outcasts, and to cheer you up, our generous Bob and Ray organization wants you to have this fine 3-speed hair dryer. Use it in good health, sir.
Are you trying to be funny?
No.
I mean, my condition has let me bald as an egg, and you give me a hair dryer.
Just use it in good health. That's least we can do. Our final victim of misfortune is Mrs. Emma Grulock of Newport, Kentucky. And according to your card, you're trying to sell peanut brittle from door to door here in New York to raise money for new playground equipment in your poverty-stricken little town. Is that right?
Well, actually, Newport's not poverty-stricken by any means.
No?
It's just that I've worked the old peanut brittle scam there before, and besides, I figure it will take months for the New York Police Bunko Squad to discover that I'm not sending any of the loot back home to buy playground equipment.
And in the meantime, of course, you'll be trotting the streets of a strange city in all kinds of weather, trying to raise a few paltry dollars for your favorite charitable cause. Our hats are off to you, ma'am, and from our generous Bob and Ray organization, a lovely set of matched dueling pistols just for you. They have your initials on them.
Well, that's just awful. If the fuzz spots me walking around with a gun in each hand, they'll nail me for something a lot worse than petty fraud.
No thanks are necessary, ma'am. It's just our way of paying tribute to your unselfish efforts. And now, back over to Ray at the main anchor desk. And now the Rotman Corporation, maker of fine buggy whips for more than 9 centuries, brings you The Orderlies, a dramatic behind-the-scenes glimpse of life in a big city hospital.
Orderly wine coop, report at once to Chief Orderly Snellwell. Report to Chief Orderly Snellwell.
Here I am, Chief Orderly Snellwell. I hope being summoned to your executive cubicle doesn't mean that I've somehow incurred your displeasure.
Wine coop, I think you're well aware that the mere sight of you incurs my displeasure. However, I try not to let personal feelings interfere with my administrative duties here in the big city hospital.
Oh, you administrate beautifully, sir, considering the awful cross you have to bear with people like me making you nauseated all the time.
It's not people like you, Winecoop. It's you specifically.
Yes, Your Eminence. And I sure didn't mean to imply that anybody else on the staff even comes close to creating disgust the way I do.
All right, Winecoop, you can stop polishing my shoes with the tip of your nose. I think you've made your groveling attitude quite clear now.
Well, it was only meant as a gesture of devotion, Chief Orderly Schnellwell, but if it bugs you, I'll gladly return to my menial duties.
Not so fast, Winecoop. There's still the matter of a very serious charge that one of my informants has brought against you.
Really, sir? I thought those finks were all on vacation this week.
That'll be quite enough of your insolence, Winecoop. It'll only make things worse for you. Now, would you care to confirm or deny the report that you let a hospital visitor ride on one of the elevators that was clearly marked for staff use only?
Well, yeah, I think I did, but as you know, sir, we only have 4 elevators, and they're all marked for staff use only.
Are you trying to tell me that you assumed an error has been made in the posting of hospital regulations, so you just decided to ignore them?
Oh, no, sir. I'm convinced that all 4,000 of our regulations were composed by far wiser people than I, but the person I let on the elevator was a little old lady trying to visit her son on the 18th floor. If I'd made her walk upstairs, she might have collapsed.
I see. So you thoughtfully prevented her from collapsing, which also prevented her from spending at least 24 hours in the hospital's intensive care unit.
Gosh almighty, Chief Orderly Schnellwell, I didn't even stop to think that my simple kindness might cost the hospital hundreds of dollars in lost revenue.
Winecoop, failing to stop and think seems to be the outstanding feature of your career as an orderly. Was it your assumption that we force visitors to walk upstairs just for the fun of it?
Well, we do a lot of cruel things to people here just for the fun of it, so I thought it might be that way with making people walk upstairs, too. But I realize now I've been a silly little fool. Any rookie should have known that the elevator rule was for the financial benefit of the hospital, but that little old lady was just standing in the lobby whimpering, and I didn't have the backbone to deal with her. I just no good, that's all.
Now, Winecoop, there's no need to blubber. After all, we have scuffles with visitors every day who try to fight their way onto elevators. And I'm afraid a few of them actually make it, just because there weren't enough off-duty orderlies who volunteered to police the lobby.
You know, I think I'm getting the message that there might still be a way I could atone for my terrible blunder, sir. And I just want you to know that I'm going down to that lobby as soon as I get off duty and defend those elevators against the general public with my life. The more old and feeble an enemy is, the harder I'll hit him.
Winecoop, I sense a tone of ruthlessness creeping into your voice. That just could mean that you have what it takes to make a first-rate orderly after all. And the time may soon be at hand when I'll be proud to call you a colleague.
And so, utilizing brutality learned through long experience, the hospital orderly contributes his bit to medical science. Join us next time when the Rotman Corporation, maker of fine buggy whips for more than 9 centuries, will bring you another dramatic story of the orderlies.
Now, let me pass on a timely shopping reminder from the makers of Einbinder flypaper. Friends, I'm sure you're all aware of the worldwide shortage of high-quality stickum that's used in the manufacture of flypaper. Prices have been skyrocketing by the embargo on glue from Cuba, the banning of exports from the Philippines, and the failure of this year's crop in Poland. And now that you're being urged to help fight inflation by limiting your purchases of flypaper, and you'll want to be sure you're getting the very best. So always ask for genuine Einbinder flypaper, the brand you've gradually grown to trust over the course of 3 generations. Buy a small amount today. Several weeks ago, we designated East Padua, Montana as a Bob and Ray Honor City, and today we learned that the mayor of East Padua is in town, and we invited him here to chat with us and tell us what's happened since the city received that high honor. Welcome to our microphones, Mayor Ferdy Grosvenor.
Hello, Mr. Goulding.
Mayor Grosvenor, tell us what happened the day we named East Padua our honor city.
Well,
there was a sign hung over the street that said, "Welcome to East Pardue, home of grated cheese." So we took her down right after we was named an honor city, and we had Luella Banks sew in a caret mark before the word home. Then she sewed in the word honored on the bias.
Making it read, "Welcome to East Pardue, honored home of grated cheese."
Right. But it looked kind of makeshift, so we took it down and burned it.
I see.
There was a lot of cutting up the day of the honor, though. Doc Markwell, the druggist, filled a lot of prescriptions wrong. Jay Fitzer, the mechanic, went crazy with his grease gun, and he really had
Well,
a
have
great...
any changes taken place, Mayor Grosvenor?
Yes, because of the publicity East Pardue got when it was named Honor City, a lot of industry was attracted to the area.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure it will herald a new era of unparalleled prosperity in East Pardue.
Yes, sir. 3 days after we got the honor, men and equipment came to East Pardue. Bulldozers were going day and night, power shovels operating on double shifts.
Well, I'm certainly glad there was so much activity.
It took them about 4 days to push East Pardue right off the map.
You mean East Pardue is gone, Mr. Mayor?
That's right. It was pushed in a big jumble, a heap, you might say, down near the banks of the Washington River.
And East Pardue?
It ain't called East Pardue anymore. It's called Fever City because of all the activity going on there. You should see them steelworkers fling them hot rivets around.
Exciting.
A bunch of us down by the river got burned by them.
I'm sorry to hear that, sir.
Well, I just dropped by to tell you what a thrill it was to be named an honor city and a disaster area all in the same week.
Well, what do you call your little community down there by the banks of the Washington River, Mr.
Well,
Mayor?
we ain't decided really on a name yet, but we got it narrowed down to 2 choices. Tent City or Hobo Town.
Well, when you decide, be sure to let us know so we can designate it a Bob and Ray Honor City
Oh, I
yet.
don't think so. If you did, more industry might be attracted to the spot. It wouldn't take but a minute for a bulldozer to shove us in the drink.
I understand. Well, you tell all the folks out there not to be discouraged, Mr. Mayor. If they put their backs to it and build docking facilities for 30 or 40 boats, they'll have a marina.
I'll do that.
Thanks for coming by, sir.
Yes. Now, in the interest of good broadcasting, we have a reply to a recent Bob and Ray editorial in which we expressed the view that the New York City area law requiring leashes for dogs should be broadened to include cats, hamsters, and other pets. And here now to speak in response is Mr. Victor J. Bodenhamer of the National Society of Friends of the Four-Legged. Go right ahead, Mr. Bodenhamer.
Well, I certainly intend to. The attitude shown by you two birds toward my presence here today has been a humiliating experience.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, sir. Actually, we were just discussing our general reaction toward listeners who come here to present editorial rebuttals. And, of course, nothing we said was meant as a personal reflection on you.
What are you talking about? Your pal Fatso there called me a little shrimp. Now, that's about as personal as you can get, and I don't
Well,
like it one bit.
I can understand that, but by the same token, you just referred to Ray as Fatso, and he has a legion of friends who only think of him as heavy set.
Yeah? Well, I got a legion of friends who only think of me as being petite or diminutive, but never a little shrimp.
Well, I'm sure you can
Well,
overlook...
excuse me, but if you'll allow me to finish making my point here.
All right.
I'm only 5 feet 2.
Right.
But I'm very well proportioned, so that my small stature isn't even noticed unless I'm standing next to a normal person.
I hope you're not saying that you think of yourself as being abnormal just because of your diminutive stature.
No, not at all. That was just a Freudian slip. You see, I admit that I took quite a pushing around as a child because I was small, but now that I'm an adult, I have a legion of friends, as I mentioned a moment ago. Of course, you may not believe that.
No, I believe it. You seem like a decent enough person to me, and I
Oh,
have
thank
no
you. That's
reason-
the first nice thing anybody said to me since I got here.
Well, I'm sorry if the members of our staff have shown hostility toward you, Mr. Bodenhamer. I guess they just act a little cold when anybody shows up to challenge one of our editorials.
Really, I thought they were being snippy toward me just because I'm short, you know?
No, not at all. I don't
Well, a lot
think
of people do, you know. They figure that a little twerp like me can't stand up to normal people, so they really let me have it, just to make themselves feel big and important, you know?
I can assure you, Mr. Bodenheimer, that our staff shows the same rotten attitude toward every guest who comes here to deliver an editorial reply, and we've had several who are well over 6 feet tall.
No
actually.
kidding.
Yeah.
Well, gee, you really made me feel a lot better by saying that. I guess I was just being overly, sensitive about my size.
Yeah, I think
guess.
it's only natural you would be. And as you said, you took quite a pummeling as a child because you were short, and the effects of an experience like that can last a lifetime.
Well, that's very true. But not many normal-sized people have the human compassion to understand that. I really enjoyed meeting you and having this little conversation.
Well, thank you. If there's anything we can do to
Well,
make
if you're ever out in East Islip, you can stop in for dinner. Give me a call from the station. I'll come over and pick you up.
That's very kind of you, sir. But now, what about your editorial
Oh,
rebuttal?
I don't believe there's anything else I need to add. So, well, thanks for everything. You've been a real peach of a guy, you know. Goodbye.
Bye. You've been listening to a reply to a recent Bob and Ray editorial on the subject of broadening New York's present leash law for dogs. Speaking was Mr. Victor L. Bodenheimer, the little shrimp who represents the National Society of Friends of the Four-Legged. Printed copies of this editorial. A rebuttal will not be available to the public, so don't ask for one, please.
Yes, especially for not writing in. And now we journey again to Gary Summit and its unfolding story of intrigue among the socially prominent. There in stately splendor, far removed from the squalid village below, they fight their petty battles over power and money. As our action begins, spineless young Rodney Murchfield is at his desk, making plans to regain Pamela's affections from his brother Caldwell. Suddenly, he's interrupted by the entrance of Wallace Jodenfuhr, the chief engineer of the Murchfield Lead Mining Company. Rodney glances up and speaks.
Come in and sit down, Jodenfuhr. I was just planning how I might regain Pamela's affections from my despised brother Caldwell.
Well, I'm afraid I can't help you with that, Mr. Birchfield. I'm a mining engineer. I didn't even take a course in personal relations at A&M.
Well, that's all right. I have other people on my payroll who can take care of Pamela. It's been your assignment to figure out why we've had so many customer complaints recently at Murchfield Lead.
Well, I've had the quality control department working on that problem day and night, Mr. M. They brought me some wonderful news.
Well, I don't see anything wonderful about delivering lead ingots that our customers can't melt down into satisfactory toy soldiers. Even the fishing sinkers made from our product don't sink right anymore.
Well, that's what I had the guys in quality control check out.
Oh?
And their study led to the wonderful news. It seems our recent lead shipments were unsatisfactory because they weren't lead. What we've been mining lately is pure silver.
Are you saying that our underground division moved from lead into a vein of silver without knowing it?
That's what happened, all right. It's so dark down there that everything looks pretty much like lead. But, do you realize how much more a ton of silver is worth?
No, I've always feared that reading the commodity prices in the paper might make me an uninteresting person. But I gather from your attitude that silver may be of more value than lead.
You'd better believe it. This is really the discovery of a lifetime.
Well, in that case, take an extra hour for lunch with full pay, Jodenfuhr. I want to phone my broker before this news leaks out and buy every available share of Murchfield stock. In the meantime, I suggest we keep this our little secret.
Rodney's financial dealings look terribly fishy, Bowden. Someone's bound to wonder why he suddenly sold his yacht and his Shetland pony to buy 300,000 shares of Murchfield Lead.
Well, of course, his yacht is really a converted aircraft carrier, Agatha, so speaking as your attorney, I don't think there'll be any question about how he raised the cash.
Well, that's not really the point. The company's profits are down, but Rodney's buying all the stock he can. So he must have guessed what we already knew, that they've struck silver in the South Tunnel.
I suspect you're right, Agatha, and it was pure chance that Chief Engineer Jodenfuhr called me with the news. For some reason, he'd gotten an extra hour for lunch, and he was calling up some old friends.
Well, see that the man is fired for goofing off to make personal calls, and then buy as much Murchfield stock for my own account as you can get your hands on.
Very well, Agatha, but I'm not sure that's a good idea. It's against the law for corporate officials to buy company stock when they have inside information like this. I just hope the authorities never find out what you're doing.
So, how do I give you my evidence, Federal Prosecutor Lurtle? Just speak into this microphone?
That's right. You've already said that your name is Caldwell Murchfield and that you're related to those you're tattling on.
Well, I don't think of it as tattling. It's just being a good citizen. What would you do if you learned that your mother and brother were both illegally using secret information to clean up on the stock market?
Well, I don't know, but I probably wouldn't send them to jail. Of course, I wouldn't have anything to gain if I did, but all you need to do is to get your relatives in the slammer and you'll become president of a $5 billion company. Congratulations, Fink.
Will Caldwell succeed in taking over Murchfield Lead by putting Rodney and Agatha behind bars? Can Chief Engineer Yodenfuhr succeed in finding a new job with nothing but a letter of reference from a convict? And what about Rodney's secretary, who may have overheard everything? Perhaps we'll learn more next time when we hear the judge say,
I'm dismissing the case. This stuff turned out to be lead after all.
That's next week when we resume our endless story of intrigue on Gary Summit. Well, now we invite you to join us again for the Bob and Ray Public Service feature, Chatting with Dr. Chesney. Now, this is the portion of the program where we invite all of our disturbed listeners to call in and receive some expert advice from the noted psychologist, Dr. Merton Chesney. And, Doctor, I can't tell you how happy we are to have you with us again.
Really? I find it interesting that you claim to be happy when you're not exhibiting any of the usual outward signs of joy. Would you care to think about that for a moment?
Well, I don't really need to think about it. When I said I was happy to have you here, it was no big deal. I just said it to try to make you feel welcome.
Well, I assumed as much. And do you know how the rage builds up inside every time you say something just to please another person?
I assure you there's no rage building up inside me, Doctor. Now, if we could just move along
You're clenching your fists and your face is flushed. I'm afraid those are clear signs of suppressed anger.
Hey, knock it off, will you? Take the first call.
All right. If you don't want to become a well-adjusted person, that's your business. I'll just pick up line one here. Hello, you're on the air with Dr. Chesney.
Hello? I live in a large city in Pennsylvania, and I'm afraid to go out and shop in my neighborhood store.
Oh, yes, that's agoraphobia.
No, it's Pittsburgh. Well, I had the same problem when I lived in Cincinnati, so I don't think that's the cause of it.
No, I'm sure it's a fear that follows you wherever you go. And I suppose this feeling you get in stores is a panic that you may faint or even have a seizure.
Well, it's panic, all right, but not like that.
Well, suppose you describe exactly what happens, no matter how bizarre it may sound.
Well, see, I'll be pushing my cart down an aisle, perfectly natural, you know, stuffing things in my pockets and under my coat. And then I'll see the store manager watching me and starting to reach for the phone. And out of nowhere, I get this scary feeling that I'm going to be locked up.
Well, then, as you may have guessed, it's claustrophobia.
Maybe you're right. But the Pirates play here, so I always assumed it was Pittsburgh.
Well, I'm sure the insight you've gained from our little chat will help you work that out. And let's move on to another caller in need. Hello, you're on the air with Dr. Chesney.
Oh, I'm so glad I got through to you, Doctor. I have a terrible problem with sneezing fits every year, and my family physician says they're caused by my emotions.
I assume he didn't make that diagnosis until he'd ruled out allergies.
Oh, I've been through every kind of test, and then I had the cat's fur shaved off, and then I even had my husband take the feather out of his hat band. Nothing helped. I'm just a wreck.
Well, a change of scenery is often helpful in cases of hysteria like yours. Maybe an ocean cruise or something of that sort.
Well, I just can't pick up and leave on a cruise. We have 500 acres of ragweed here in the farm to be harvested.
Well, I'm sure you could find a hired hand in your local yellow pages to help with that, but giving business advice is not the job of a psychologist, so I'll have to move on to another caller. Hello, you're on the air with Dr. Chesney.
Hello. I'm a 43-year-old tradesperson who tends to have a lot of hallucinations. That's why it's hard for me to tell whether the people who are holding me hostage in this old sawmill are real or just figments of my imagination.
Well, a chemical imbalance in the brain can sometimes make imaginary events seem very real.
Yeah, that's what I kept telling myself the whole first week. But then one of the guys hit me on the head and I got a big bump. That's when I decided maybe it was really happening.
No, let me assure you that the body responds to messages received through the nerve system, so if you thought you'd actually been struck, it's merely a case...
Look, one of them just called me using the phone. Now I'm in Dutch for sure.
No, I don't think so. See, putting an element of danger into one's fantasy is just a way of punishing yourself for some imaginary wrong you committed in childhood. You can see that, can't you? I'm sure. Hello? Hello? Well, apparently he isn't motivated to continue his treatment just now. So I'll be signing off by saying this is Dr. Merton Chesney wishing you all good luck and good emotional stability.
And now, Dining Out with Bob and Ray, the informative feature that helps guide you to some of the lesser-known but truly outstanding gourmet restaurants around New York and around the world. Well, Bob, I believe your adventure in dining this week took you to one of those quaint little sidewalk cafes up in the Central Park area.
Yes, it did, Ray. I'd heard a great deal about the specialties at Bernie's Pushcart on the Green. And I finally was fortunate enough to locate it the other day as it was moving north near 85th Street.
Well, I assume then from what you're saying that Bernie's Pushcart on the Green doesn't stay in one location the way most restaurants do.
No, I think it's unique among gourmet restaurants in that one respect. Bernie, my dining host, told me that he ranges from Central Park south clear up to the mid-'80s, but his regular clientele is familiar with his route, so they plan their lunch hours for times when they know he'll be in the neighborhood.
Well, moving around as he does, I don't imagine that Bernie's able to provide too much in the way of atmosphere or that impeccable table service that we associate with many of the finer restaurants.
No, as the name implies, Bernie's Pushcart on the Green is just a pushcart on the green, but I would say that the wide range of offerings from the menu more than makes up for the lack of atmosphere and service. I had the number 2 combination. That's a hot dog with pickle relish. Bernie also offers his famous hot dog with mustard, hot dog with ketchup, or hot dog Chateaubriand. That's served for 2 with sauerkraut.
Well, I suppose you can also get a plain hot dog with nothing on it if you prefer.
No, I don't think you can. But with all the succulent relishes offered by Bernie, I don't imagine the absence of a plain hot dog from the menu will bother anybody. Only word of caution I might offer is that it's still a little too early in the season to enjoy an evening dinner at Bernie's. It gets chilly in the park after the sun goes down. Of course, all the muggers and the weirdos come out after dark and don't really want to be there.
From the way you've described Bernie's Pushcart on the Green, I think that luncheon would be the best meal to enjoy there, at least until we're well into spring.
Now I know we both have plans for dining out in the week ahead as we search for more little-known but truly fine restaurants around town. Well, if we had an old clock on the wall, I think it would be telling us that we've got to get out of here for this meeting of the Bob and Ray Public Radio Show.
It was produced for the Radio Foundation by Larry Josephson, who's not at all sure an educated consumer is his best customer.
Marjorie Van Halderen was associate producer, technical director Malcolm Addy, music by Paul Taubman, who takes requests but hates it when they ask for valse chinoise.
Sound effects were by Al Schaefer, who stubbornly believes that butter is what they put on movie theater popcorn.
Engineers were Mike Moran and Joe Lopes, production assistants Diana Freed and Stuart Zagnett.
Funding for the program by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Through NPR's Satellite Program Development Fund.
And now this is Ray Goulding reminding you to write if you get work.
Bob Elliott reminding you to hang by your thumb.
For a free picture of Bob and Ray, send a stamped, self-addressed envelope to Bob and Ray Picture, Box 5000, GPO, New York 10116. That's Bob and Ray Picture, Box 5000, GPO, New York 10116. This program was independently produced by the Radio Foundation.